Hi, everyone. This is Joe Kroll with this weekly edition of the weekly update of the Society of St. Sebastian. Thanks for joining us. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the in vitro fertilization industry and the need to pass incremental legislation that helps limit the various harms that we see coming out of the IVF industry that are major affronts to the dignity and sanctity of life. Let's just give a little bit of background here. I think it's important to start there. A recent Catholic News Agency article came out just within the last few weeks that indicated, interestingly enough, that it's more than likely there are more than 1 million abandoned frozen embryonic children in various IVF clinics around the nation. That's a horrific number. That's a staggering number. And it certainly raises a question of what are we going to do? What are we, the pro-life movement, going to do to help stem the tide of this atrocious sort of thing? Furthermore, we also know that embryonic children are routinely destroyed because they don't meet certain specifications, because they may no longer be wanted, or in some cases they may have been abandoned and the clinics are not sure what to do with them. In many divorce cases, embryonic children are treated as property that can be destroyed. If one parent, one of the spouses doesn't want the children anymore, doesn't want to be a parent, even though they've helped create this child, many courts regard them as property and they allow them to be destroyed. These are major affronts to life. And we as a pro-life movement certainly need to look at legislative initiatives that are going to help stop this sort of thing from happening. Now, what are some things that we can look at? Well, there's actually a lot of things that we can look at. Arizona, in many ways, started really kind of leading the way last year when they passed a bill that mandated in these divorce proceedings where you have couples fighting over embryos, where one wants to keep the embryonic children and another wants to destroy the embryonic children. They passed a law that simply says that, hey, the parent that wants to keep the children can keep the children. And the parent that doesn't want the children, all parental rights can be absolved. Well, that's a good first step. It certainly recognizes that those embryos certainly have a right to life. It treats them in a better light. It recognizes the humanity of those embryonic children and so forth. In many ways, this is something that many states could actually pass in their various state legislatures as well. Another area to look at, interestingly enough, is informed consent legislation. Many egg donors really kind of give their eggs on an altruistic basis. They want to help infertile couples. But many of these egg donors probably do not have any idea what happens when their eggs are used to create embryos. They probably don't realize what the rate is of them being frozen perpetually in some cases, or even destroyed because they don't meet certain specifications. I think in many ways, if legislation like this is passed and made into law, I think it might give women pause, and they may think twice about donating their eggs. They may think instead, hey, the likelihood of my eggs being used to create an embryo that has a chance of survival is pretty slim. I don't want to put, any genetic child of mine through that sort of risk. We could also look at limits on egg harvesting. It's not uncommon when an egg donor goes through the process that, anywhere from 8 to 12 eggs may be harvested. Well, maybe only 3 eggs need to be harvested. In this way, only 3 embryos can be created, and there's less likely of a chance from them being either destroyed or even being frozen perpetually. Another way to look at it is limiting the number of eggs that are even fertilized. So it would have the same result in many cases as well. There's all sorts of things that we can do. Some of the more drastic measures that really haven't been thought up yet, or I should say, haven't been tried yet, because like I said, in many ways, the IVF industry is in the wild west of law. There's no law regulating it in most of the states, and so they're able to get away with many, many things. And so there's not really any case law that regulates them. There's not any statutes that regulate them, nothing for the most part. And so some new ways need to probably be examined, such as, telling parents, for example, that they have an obligation under the law to actually try to implant those embryos so they have an opportunity to try to even grow further and become a baby to be born and so forth. The simple fact is we really need to do a lot more when it comes to regulating the in vitro fertilization industry. We know that there are well over 1 million cases in which we have frozen embryos that are perpetually frozen. We can't allow for this. We know that this is an industry that routinely destroys embryos that they don't see fit. This needs to change. And I think as a whole, the pro-life movement really needs to come together, and especially within the states, we need to see more activity from various pro-life organizations pushing legislators to recognize the humanity of these embryonic children that are created through in vitro fertilization. And like I said, there are several initiatives that we can look at. Well, thank you for hanging out with me for these last few minutes. If you like what you see, give us a big thumbs up. You can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you're willing to help us out, please donate to the Society of St. Sebastian. We really enjoy bringing, expert information to you guys. So those of you that are advocating for life can be even more informed and even become a better advocate for life. We appreciate everything you do. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless.